we discuss about the Marshall's theory of cardinal utility today, and last class we discussed about the marginal utility, equimarginal utility, diminishing marginal utility, derivation of demand curve with the help of law of diminishing marginal utility, and also consumer surplus, Marshall's consumer surplus. Now, today we discuss about the ordinal utility analysis of J.R. Hicks and Allen. Like Marshall, J.R. Hicks and Allen are describe the consumer's behavior with the help of the ordinal approach. And in this, Marshall discussed it quantitatively manner, but Hicks and Allen discuss it in qualitative manner. They describe that it utility is the psychological phenomenon. This theory also based on assumption. The assumptions are rationality. The basic assumption is that consumer is a rational being. Second, indifference curve analysis assumes that utility is only ordinarily expressible. That means it only comparable. Then transitivity. Consumer choices are assumed to be transitive. That means transitivity of choices means that if a consumer prefers A to B and B to C, then he prefers A to C. Or if C treats A greater than B and B greater than C, then C also treats A greater than C. Then consistency. Consistency of choice means that if a person prefers A over B in one period, he or she will not prefer B over A in another period. That means he always prefer A over B. Non-satiety. This assumption means that a consumer prefers a larger quantity of all the goods over smaller quantities of the same. That means the consumer always chooses a larger quantity. Then sixth assumption is the diminishing marginal rate of substitution. MRS is that rate which a consumer is willing to substitute one commodity for another commodity, while maintaining the same utility or level of satisfaction of the consumer. The concept of diminishing MRS will be discussed in later. Indifference curve analysis. J.R. Hicks used the concept of IC to analyze consumers' behavior. A consumer facing choice between large number of bundles of two goods tries to maximum his satisfaction by choosing a combination which gives him maximum utility. That goods can be substituted for each other and identifies various combinations of commodities that give him equal level of satisfaction. When all these combinations are plotted graphically, it produces a curve called indifference curve. Indifference schedule. An indifference schedule is a table which represents various combinations of two goods, which yield equal satisfaction to consumers. Since all the combinations give equal level of satisfaction, consumer is indifferent between them. Here is a indifference schedule of two commodities X and Y. X is the cup of tea and Y is the biscuits. Here in the table, 5 different combinations are shown: A, B, C, D, and E. And all these combinations give him equal satisfaction. In combinations A, he buys 1 cup of tea and 12 biscuits. In combination B, it prepares 2 cups of tea and 8 biscuits. And at that, all the points are give different types of different combinations, but satisfaction level is same. Then, when the schedule is plotted, or when all the A, B, C, D, and E point plotted in diagrammatically, that is give a curve, that is indifference curve. The indifference curve is locus of all the combination of two commodities which give same level of satisfaction to the consumer. It shows that all the combination of good x and y and A, B, C, D, and E will yield equal level of satisfaction to the consumer. The curve is downward sloping, convex to the point of the origin. And the indifference curve always sloping downward to the right, and it is convex to the origin. Then indifference map. The combination of two commodities X and Y given in the indifference schedule are not the only possible combination for these commodities. There is different types of combinations are also present. Either they are less than or greater than the previous combination. At the time, when all the combinations are plotted, then there we see different types of indifference curve is present. That time, the indifference curve, then the consumer may make other combination with more of one or both of the goods, and each combination yielding the same satisfaction but greater than the satisfaction indicator. When all these combinations are plotting, there is different types of indifference curve drawn. That time, that is the collection of the indifference curve is called indifference map. Or in other terms, set or family of indifference curve is an indifference map. And then what is law of diminishing marginal rate of substitution? What is MRS? Marginal rate of substitution. Marginal rate of substitution may be defined as the rate at which a consumer will exchange successive units of a commodity for another. In other terms, marginal rate of substitution is the rate at which, in order to get the additional units of a commodity, the consumer is willing to sacrifice or give up to get one additional unit of another commodity. The marginal rate of substitution can symbolically presented as MRS XY equal to delta Y by delta X. MRS XY equal to marginal rate of substitution of X for Y. Delta Y is change in Y commodity. Delta X change in X commodity. In ordinal utility theory, the marginal rate of substitution is decreasing in nature. It means that the quantity of a commodity that a consumer is willing to sacrifice for an additional unit of another commodity goes on decreasing. In law of diminishing marginal rate of substitution is an extensive form of the law of diminishing marginal utility. In the Marshall's theory, law of diminishing marginal utility states that as a consumer increases the consumption of a good, his marginal utility goes on diminishing. Similarly, as consumer gets more and more unit of good X, he is willing to sacrifice less and less units of good Y for each extra unit of X. The significance of good X in terms of good Y goes on diminishing with each addition of good X. That can be discussed with a help of a marginal rate of substitution schedule. In this schedule, there are units of Y good and MRS of X for Y. Units of X good, units of Y good, and MRS of X for Y good. 3 columns are present. And when we take 1 unit of good X, then that time it takes 10 units of good Y. As it takes additional unit of good X too, that time it takes 7 units of good Y and sacrifice or give up 3 units of good Y. Additional 1 unit take from good X is 3 and it sacrifice then 2 units of good Y. At that time, the MRS of second, that is 3:1, then 2:1, then 1:1. As the consumer desires to have additional unit of X, he is willing to give away less and less units of Y, so that the marginal rate of substitution falls from 3:1 to 1:1 in the fourth combination. In the indifference curve, at point M on the indifference curve, it is 1. The consumer is willing to give up 3 units of Y to get an additional unit of X. Hence, MRS XY equal to 3. As he moves along the curve from M to N point, that time MRS XY equal to 2. When the consumer moves downward along the indifference curve, he acquires more of X, less of Y. The amount of Y he is prepared to give up to get additional units of X becomes smaller and smaller. So, the marginal rate of substitution of X for Y is the slope of the curve at point on the indifference curve, such as points M, N, or P. Thus, MRS XY equal to delta Y by delta X, or marginal rate of substitution of X for Y equal to change in Y commodity by change in X commodity. Then properties of indifference curve. First property of indifference curve is indifference curve slopes downwards from left to right. It means that indifference curve has a negative slope. This is based on the assumption if a consumer uses more quantity of one good, he has to reduce the consumption of the other good in then origin or O. This property implies that the principle of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. It means that as the units of X are increased by equal amounts, the Y diminishes by smaller and smaller amounts. This happens because as a consumer gets more and more units of X goods, he is willing to give up less and less units of good Y for each extra unit of X. Third property, the indifference curves cannot intersect each other. This is because that each indifference curve represents different level of satisfaction. If two indifference curves intersect, it will lead to self-contradictory result. In the diagram 6.4, you said that there is two indifference curve, IC1 and IC2 are intersecting each other at point C. So, but it is impossible. But suppose they are intersecting, then point A and point C on indifference curve IC1 represents the same level of satisfaction. That is from A. That means A combination equal to the satisfaction of C combinations. Then in IC2 also B and C are the same level, give same level of satisfaction, but point but this is impossible because at combination B quantities of both X and Y are more than the combination A. So point B and point A are not equal, does not give equal level of satisfaction. Because of that, B lies on the higher IC curve and it gives more quantities of both X and Y. So that these two the two indifference curve never intersect with each other. Then fourth property, the higher indifference curve represents higher level of satisfaction. In figure 6.5, the indifference curve IC2 lies above and to the right of the IC1. Point C on the IC2 represents more units of X than point A on IC1. Similarly, point B on IC2 represents more units of Y than point A on IC1. It is that higher IC curve, the higher level of satisfaction. So our consumer prefers more of good to less of it. So that higher level of IC curve always gives high level of satisfaction. Then fifth property is indifference curve each do not touch either of the axes X or Y. This is because of the assumption that the consumer purchases combination of different commodities. An indifference curve touches either axis. It means the consumer wants only one commodity and his demand for the second commodity is zero. But here, this in our assumption, we discussed the assumption of indifference curve, which is too good model, so that it is never possible. Then no indifference curve cuts either of axis. If it were to happen, then the consumer will be consuming negative quantity of the commodity, which makes no sense. So that the indifference curve never cuts either of axis. These are six properties of IC curve. Then there is also some exceptional shapes of indifference case. Suppose when two goods are perfect substitutes of each other, their indifference curve will be a straight diagonal line sloping downwards from left to right. It is because of the fact that MRS in such cases is constant. That means MRS is equal to 1. For example, suppose good A and good B are perfect substitutes. Consumer will be indifferent between them and will be ready to sacrifice equal quantity of good A to achieve good B. But even here the ICS will not cross the axis. And in the perfect substitutes, the IC curve is a straight line. Then perfect complements. It is also an exceptional shape. Two goods may be perfect complementary to each other, just as left and right shoes, or cups and saucers of a tea set. In each case, the indifference curve will be parallel to each other and bent at 90-degree angle, or it is L shape. Perfect complementary goods are those goods which are used in fixed ratio. Wash, that means 1:1 or 2:2. They cannot be substituted for each other, thus putting MRS as 0. Here, MRS is 0. In the diagram, in the diagram 6.7, there is IC1 and IC2 are right angle curves, meaning that the consumer buys piece of each right shoe. This will be useless. The consumer will be no better off and he will remain at point A on IC1. In case he buys two pieces of left shoe and only one piece of right shoe, it will be useless. The consumer will be no better off and he will remain at point C of IC1. It means that having one more pair of shoe will not add to his satisfaction. But if he buys one more shoe, his satisfaction will immensely increase and he will move to point B on higher IC curve, IC2. So here the complementary goods both are added. Both the combination from the sacrifice or additional take up and sacrifice is equal. Then budget line. How do you mean by budget line? It is also a important method to determine the consumer's behavior or consumer's equilibrium in case of consumer's IC curve. A rational consumer always acts according to his budget constraint and tries to maximum his level of satisfaction. Thus, the budget line, what is called also budget constraint, essential for understanding the theory of consumer's equilibrium. A consumer, in his attempt to maximum his satisfaction, will try to reach the highest possible indifference curve. But in his pursuit of maximizing satisfaction by buying more and more goods, he has to consider two constraints. First, he has to pay the prices for the goods, and secondly, he has a limited money income to purchase the goods. Thus, How much a person is capable to buy depends upon the prices of the goods and the money income which he has at his disposal. Price line or budget line represents all possible combinations of two goods that a consumer can purchase with his given income and the given prices of two goods. It can be described through a schedule. Suppose a consumer has an income rupees 100 to spend on oranges and apples with cost of rupees 10 each. He can either spend his limited income only on one good or both the goods. All the possible alternate combinations of two goods are presented here. If the consumer spends his total income of rupees 100 on apples, he is able to buy 10 apples. On the other hand, if he buys oranges, he can get 10 oranges by spending his total further income. Further, a consumer can also buy both the goods in different combinations. The budget line, the budget line is nothing else than the consumer can buy any bundle of such commodities. Here, the budget line presents M equal to Px M equal to or more than Px into Qx plus Py into Qy, where Px and Py are prices of goods and Y respectively. M is the money income. Then Qy equal to M by Py minus Px by Py into Qs. This is the budget line. This is the budget line. When budget line plotted on a diagrammatically, we find that in y-axis divided by change in the variable on the y-axis, slope of the budget line is given. Example will be number of units of oranges that the consumer is willing to sacrifice for an additional unit of X commodity. So, in the diagram, y-axis present quantity of Y and the x-axis represents quantity of X. And the budget line is slope when it is sloped downward to the right. And slope of budget line is nothing else that units of Y willing to sacrifice by units of X willing to gain. That means delta Y by delta X. And price ratio equal to price of X by price of Y equal to minus Px by Py. And budget line also shift forward, rightward or leftward. Budget line is drawn on the basis of assumption of constant prices of two goods and constant income of the consumer. Thus, if there is any change in either or two variables, budget line shifts. There are two variables that causes shift in budget line. First, change in income of the consumer or change in equal proportion of prices of both the goods. First, change in income of the consumer. If income changes while the prices of goods remains the same, budget line will shift rightwards or leftwards. Since the prices of two goods are constant, slope of budget line will remain constant. The effect of changes in income on the budget line is shown on the diagram. If consumers' income increases while prices of both goods X and Y remains unchanged, the price line shifts upward and is parallel to original budget line. This is because with the increased income, the consumer is able to purchase professionally larger quantity of both goods than before. On the other hand, if income of the consumer decreases, prices of both goods X and Y remaining unchanged, the budget line shifts downward but remains parallel to the original price line. This is because a lower income will leave the consumer in a position to buy proportionally smaller quantities of both the goods. Then changes in price of either of two goods. Budget line also shifts when there is change in price of either of two goods. Increase in price of any commodity reduces the purchasing power of the consumer, in turn reducing the quantity demanded. Shift of budget line due to change in prices of either good X or good Y is presented with a diagram. Suppose price of good X rises, the price of good Y and income remaining constant. With the higher price of good X, the consumer can purchase smaller quantity of X. In the figure 6.10, original price line is AB. With increase in price of good X, budget line will shift to AB2. That means consumer will be able to buy less quantity of good X and quantity of good Y remaining same. Similarly, when there is a fall in price of good X, keeping prices of good Y constant, budget line shifts from AB1. Consumer will be able to buy more quantity of good X, quantity of good Y remaining same. If there is change in price of good Y, the changes in the budget line when price of good Y falls or rises, with the prices of good X and income remaining the same. It can be observed that in 6.11 diagram, it can be described. The initial budget line is AB with fall in price of good Y, other things remaining unchanged. The consumer could buy more of Y with the given money income, and therefore budget line will shift above to EB. Similarly, with the rise in price of Y, other things being constant, and the budget line will shift below to OB to DB. So, when money income change, the budget line also shift, but in case of the income change, the budget line is the leftward or rightward, but it parallel to or initial budget line. But in case of the price changes, then when good X changes, that means only good X, the price line is constant in the at the level of A, but it changes at the on the O X axis. It is leftward or rightward due to the changes in price of X. And like that, when price Y, good price of good Y changes, then that time also the initial price line is only in case of the Y commodity, the price line is changed. Then consumer equilibrium through indifference curve analysis. Like we discussed then Marshall's equilibrium with the help of Marshallian theory, like that. Consumer equilibrium through also consumer we can discuss consumer equilibrium through indifference curve analysis. Assumption of the consumer equilibrium. Consumer equilibrium is a point maximum satisfaction for the consumer. It is state of rest for the consumer. There is some assumption in the consumer in the equilibrium point. First, rationality. The consumer is rational. He wants to obtain maximum satisfaction given his income and prices. Consumer has an indifference map showing his scale of preference for various combinations of good X and Y. Third, utility is ordinal. It is assumed that the consumer can rank his preference according to the satisfaction of each combination of goods. Fourth assumption is consistency of choice. It is also assumed that the consumer is constant in the choice of combination of goods. Then fifth assumption is consumer has a given and fixed amount of money income to spend on the goods. Thus, consumer has to choose to spend his income on either of the two goods or combination thereof. Then six, all the units of the goods are homogeneous. And seven, the goods are divisible. That means they can be divided into small units. And seventh and eighth assumption is the total utility. The total utility of the consumer depends on the quantities of the good consumed. Condition of consumer equilibrium. There are two fundamental conditions of consumer's equilibrium through indifference curve approach. First one is the price line should be tangent to the indifference curve. It means that at the point of equilibrium, the slope of the indifference curve and of the price line should be same. The slope of indifference curve indicates MRS XY, means delta y by delta x, or the slope of the price line indicates the ratio between price of two goods x and y, that means px by py. Then second condition is indifference curve should be convex to the point of origin, that means marginal rate of substitution of x for y is equal to the slope of the price line that indicates the ratio between price of two goods. That means MRS XY equal to PX by PY. Suppose there are two goods X and Y. The first condition for consumer's equilibrium is that MRS XY equal to PX by PY. If MRS XY greater than PX by PY, it means that the consumer is willing to pay more for X than the price prevailing in the market. As a result, the consumer buys more of X. As a result, MRS falls till it becomes equal to the ratio of prices and the equilibrium is established. Second, if MRS XY less than the PX PY, it means that the consumer is willing to pay less for X than the price prevailing in the market. It indicates that the consumer to buy less of X and more of Y. As a result, MRS rises till it becomes equal to the ratio of prices and the equilibrium is established. Second condition is MRS continuously falls. The second condition for consumer's equilibrium is that MRS must be diminishing at the point of equilibrium. That means the indifference curve must be convex to the origin at the point of equilibrium. Unless MRS continuously falls, the equilibrium cannot be established. Thus, both the conditions need to be fulfilled for consumer to be in equilibrium. Let us discuss with the help of a diagram. In figure 6.12, IC1, IC2 and IC3 are the three indifference curves and MM is the budget line. With the constraint of budget line, the highest indifference curve which a consumer can reach is IC2. The budget line is tangent to indifference curve IC2 at point P. This is the point of consumer equilibrium. All other points on the budget line to the left or right of point P will lie on lower indifference curve and thus indicate a lower level of satisfaction. Each budget line can be tangent to one and only one indifference curve. Consumer maximizes his satisfaction at point P when both the conditions of consumer's equilibrium are satisfied. MRS equal to ratio of prices or PX by PY. At tangency point P, the absolute value of the slope of the indifference curve and that of the budget line are same. Equilibrium cannot be established at any other point such as MRS XY more than PX by PY at, at all points to the left or point P or MRS XY less than PX by PY all points to the right of point P. So, equilibrium is established at point P when MRS XY equal to PX by PY or marginal rate of substitution of X for Y equal to the ratio of prices or price X and price Y. Then second condition, MRS continuously falls. The second condition is also satisfied at point P. As MRS is diminishing at point P, IC2 is convex to the origin at point P. So the consumer is equilibrium at point P only. The above or below below P, the point B, the point P, it cannot be achieved these two conditions, so that these are not equilibrium point for the consumers. And for consumers equilibrium, two condition is important. When these two conditions are fulfilled, then can the consumer got his maximum satisfaction. This is Hicksian indifference curves consumers equilibrium point. So there is some exceptional shapes of indifference curve and corner equilibrium. We know that indifference curve may take different shape in exceptional case like perfect substitutes, complements. Perfect complements and perfect substitutes. In case of perfect complements, the IC curve is right angled curve, and in perfect substitutes, the IC curve is straight line. And also, if an assumption of two goods is dropped, indifference curve may touch x-axis or y-axis also. In case of an exceptional shape of an indifference curve, equilibrium may be called as corner solution. This section and corner solution. Normally, an equilibrium is achieved at the point of tangency between the budget line and his indifference curve. At this point, consumer's preferences are such that he likes to consume some amount of both the goods. This equilibrium position at the point of tangency, which lies within commodity space between the two axes, is often called interior solution. Interior solution implies that consumers' pattern of consumption is diversified and they prefer basket or bundle of several different goods instead of spending their entire income on a single commodity. However, this may not be true in real life, and a consumer may prefer small number of goods and services rather than buying all goods and services available. There may be various reasons for such behavior: price, taste, and preferences. Corner solution when only commodity Y is purchased. In 6.13 diagram, we see this corner solution. This diagram presents a case where indifference made between two goods X and Y and budget line BL are such that the interior solution is not possible, and consumer in its equilibrium position at point B will not consume any quantity of commodity X. The reason behind that indifference may reach high price of commodity X. As you already know that the slope of budget line is ratio of price of two goods. High price of good X makes the budget line is steeper. then the indifference curves between the two commodities. That means price or opportunity cost of commodity X in the market is greater than the marginal rate of substitution of X for Y, which indicates willingness to pay for the commodity X. The price of good X is so high that the consumer does not purchase even 1 unit of the commodity X. Thus, the consumer maximizes his satisfaction or is in equilibrium at the corner point B, where he buys only commodity Y. Thus, consumer's equilibrium in this case is a corner solution. Corner solution when only commodity X is purchased. On the other hand, when the indifference made between the two goods is such that the budget line BL is less steep than the indifference curve between the two goods, so that the MRS XY is more than PX by PY for all levels of consumption along the budget line BL. It is described on the diagram 6.14. Therefore, he maximizes his satisfaction at the corner point L, where he buys only commodity X and none of Y. In this case, price of commodity Y and willingness to pay for it are low, that he does not consider it or does not consider to purchase even 1 unit of it, and he only purchase. It is only corner solution when only commodity X is purchased. Then corner equilibrium and concave indifference curves. Suppose the indifference curve are usually convex to the origin, but convexity of indifference curve is due to the reason that MRS of X for Y falls as more of X is substituted for Y. However, indifference curve are concave to the origin in some exceptional cases. Concavity of the IC curve implies that the marginal rate of substitution of X for Y increases when more of X is substituted for Y. Thus, in case of concave indifference curve, consumer will choose or buy only one good. It implies that the consumer prefers to buy only one good and does not prefer diversification in this buying pattern. In case of concave indifference curve, the consumer will not be in equilibrium at the point of tangency between budget line and indifference curve. In this case, interior solution will not exist. Instead, we would have corner solution for consumer's equilibrium. Corner solution in case of concave indifference curve presented with the help of diagram is described on the diagram 6.15. It can be observed from that the given budget line BL is tangent to the indifference curve IC2 at point Q, where consumer cannot be in equilibrium at point Q, since by moving along the given budget line BL, he can get onto higher indifference curve and obtain greater satisfaction than at Q. Thus, by moving on higher indifference curve, he will reach at extreme point B or point L. In the diagram, point B is on higher indifference curve. Thus, consumer will be satisfied at point B, where he will only buy OB units of commodity Y. It should be noted that at B, the budget line is not tangent to the indifference curve IC5, even though the consumer is here in equilibrium. It is clear that when a consumer has concave indifference curve, he will consume only one good. Corner solution in case of perfect substitutes and perfect complements. Another case of corner solution is the perfect substitutes. Indifference curve for perfect substitutes are linear. In their case, tangency or interior solution for consumers equilibrium is not possible, since the budget line cannot be tangent to a point of the straight line in straight line indifference curve of substitutes. In this case, budget line would cut the straight line icicle. This one also present with the help of a diagram. It in the 6.16. It, this one present a case where slope of the budget line BL is greater than the slope of IC curve. If the slope of the budget line is greater than the slope of IC curve, B would lie on a higher IC curve than L, and the consumer will buy only Y commodity. And in 6.16b presents a case the slope of the budget line can be less than the slope of IC curve. If the slope of the budget line is less than the slope of IC curve, L would be lie on a higher IC curve than B, and the consumer will buy only X commodity. Another exceptional case of perfect complementary goods is presented in the diagram 6.7, where IC curve is right angled curve. In such a case, the equilibrium of the consumer will be determined at the corner of indifference curve, which just touches the budget line. It can be concluded from the diagram that in case of perfect complements, equilibrium point will be point C and will be consuming OM of X and ON of Y. In this situation, the both the goods are consuming equal amounts. So today you know about the IC curves and the IC curves and their shapes, properties, and exceptional shapes of IC curve, and then equilibrium of the IC curve and the exceptional equilibrium of the IC curves. So today we finished about the consumer's behavior. Tomorrow we start from the price effect or income effect or substitution effect. Thank you.